Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spettin, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we have a lot to get into this week. In this episode, we're going to highlight Colton Cowser, your American League Player of the Week, and his hot start to the season, as well as the debut of Jackson Holliday. Later on this week, we're going to take a look at the pitching in the minor leagues, and then also answer questions from our listeners. But before we begin, we have an exciting announcement here, which is that on Saturday, May 11th, we will be returning to Checker Spot Brewing in Baltimore for our second live show there, our third overall, our second at Checker Spot. We're very happy to be welcomed back by the great staff there. Our plan is to begin the show around 2 p.m. that afternoon, and we encourage our listeners to come not just for the show, but to stick around after the game or after the show, as the Orioles will be taking on the Arizona Diamondbacks that afternoon. If you have tickets to the Orioles game, don't worry. Checker Spot is just a short distance from Camden Yards, and it's a great destination pregame and perhaps postgame as well. Checker Spot is at 1421 Ridgely Street in Baltimore. We will have more details about the show between now and May 11th, but be on the lookout for announcements of guests. We'll also have a Q&A with listeners, and who knows what else. And Bob, I know right now you're on a mission when it comes to booking guests for this show.
Yes, I am. They will probably be the guests that you're expecting, but hey, we appreciate those guests because they're great guests, and yeah, we'd love to have them out again, and maybe there will be a surprise or two up my sleeve. You never know who I will just randomly DM and see what they have to say. So yeah, I'm excited for it, and hopefully we get some listeners turning out to see us.
Yeah. There's a certain billionaire that likes to wander around the Camden Yards area, so wouldn't that be a fun afternoon? But
certainly looking forward to it. And as I said, we will have more on the live show between now and May 11th. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to start off, though, on tonight's episode by recognizing Colton Cowser, who continues his hot start to the season by being named Player of the Week for last week. Cowser just having a very good start, as I mentioned so far, hitting the ball hard, playing good left field. And Nick, I'll start with you here because you've been all three of us have been Cowser supporters for a long time, but you've been a very vocal one. What's your reaction to the start that he's getting off to in the major leagues?
The Colton Cowser rants paid off. Glad they didn't make me look like a complete idiot in past episodes. I'm just honestly, man, it's been a lot of fun to watch him settle in here. I know it's only been a week or so. We're still talking small sample size territory, but we're recording on the heels of I think he went 0 for 4 with 4 Ks tonight. Rough time in there, Colton. But still, you zoom out and look at this big picture here. I could not be more excited for Colton Cowser to be taking control of this job in the major leagues, because I go back to when he was drafted. He was not a popular pick among a lot of fans, right? I didn't watch Sam Houston baseball beforehand. That was back in this Dr. Stephen Loftus days, and I remember having him on before the draft when Cowser's name was being thrown out there, and Stephen was, fairly warm on Cowser and his game and what he could bring to the organization. And he really sold me after the draft. I think we brought him back on, and he was pretty hyped about the Colton Cowser pick and what he was going to bring. And so I was like, this is cool, right? It seemed like he was a high floor, maybe not a super high ceiling type player, but I was still excited to see what he could become. And then we got to watch him in Delmarva, and it was like, oh, this matches up with the scouting reports. This matches up with kind of what Steven was dreaming on when he talked about him a little bit after the draft. And then immediately, though, in Aberdeen, when he started to struggle, everyone who hated that draft pick jumped on him. There was we have the Colton Cowser tweet. I pulled that tweet up. I should put that one out there. We have a Colton Cowser problem tweet. He's striking out too much. The guy just completed he was AL Player of the Week this past week in Major League Baseball. He's got take away Monday night's game. I don't have those updated numbers here, but he had a 302 WRC plus in his first 14 games this season. He's at 1.2 F4 already right now. He's playing really good defense out there. That game in Kansas City in the rain, he was making good plays. He's doing it at the plate. He's doing it on the base paths. He's showing that power that John Muley came on before the season started and said, look, this organization thinks there's more power in there. And we probably going to end up seeing that this year. or at least the Orioles really hope they see that power this year. That home run he had the other day, man, that was just like he let out every frustration he had and was just like exclamation point statement. I'm here, MFers. Like, this is my job. I have arrived. That was one of the most beautiful home runs I've seen this year.
The 3-0 in Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like that was the moment. Like, Colton Cowser's here. He's arrived. He's gonna have his stretches where it's maybe not be as pretty, but I'm just so glad he seems to be settling in and taking over this role. We'll see what this means for like Austin Hayes. We'll see what it means as the season goes on in terms of playing time, but patience paid off with this kid in a major way.
Yeah, he went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts tonight, but he's still batting .395 with a 1297 OPS. He showed off the range, the good reads that we talked about as he was coming up that he did not display in the major leagues in his short time in 2023. He made some great plays in Boston against the Green Monster and in left field at Camden Yards. Today he was playing right field and showed off his arm. Didn't throw anybody out, but you could just see it. He let it air out a little bit. He's just carrying himself much differently, much more confident. I think it was important for him, his own sake, to get off to a good start. He had a great spring. He won the job to make the team. He didn't get as much playing time as he probably should have early in the season, but he made the most of what he got. And I think his confidence was building every single time he showed up to the field. And maybe it's the beard. The beard looks good. And he just, even when he's striking out, you can see he's just like, damn, I missed that one. It just is so much different from last year, and love to see it. I think he's going to be in the lineup most nights, at least, unless he goes on a big time struggle, which I don't see happening. He has not shown off the great walking skills, plate discipline, on base percentage, but he hasn't had to, because when you're hot, you're going to be more aggressive and you're going to hit the ball hard with impact. He's got 10 extra base hits already, 6 doubles, 4 home runs. He's stolen 2 bases. And even though he's only walked 3 times, he still has an 8% walk rate, which is right around league average. And we know he can do better than that. I think he's going to be a mainstay for the Orioles. He's announced himself, like Nick said, he's arrived. I agree that 3-0 home run in the extra innings was the one that was like, my God, he didn't just go the opposite way with the breaking ball. He sat on a fastball and just destroyed it to right center field, and looked good doing it. Just lean back and let it rip. So I'm super excited that Cowser's here, and maybe that had to do with why they brought up Jackson Holliday when they did, because they said, okay, Cowser's done adapting. Let's bring up the next kid to adapt.
Cowser last week hit .435 with 4 homers, 12 RBIs, and 4 doubles. What has jumped out to me, and I think you're both touched on some really good points. And Bob, I have especially noticed that Cowser seems more relaxed in his approach compared to the way he looked in the major leagues last year, and more confident in the results are there for him. What jumps out at me is just that he can hit the ball hard to all fields. And it's maybe outside of Gunnar Henderson, I don't know if the Orioles have a hitter who can do it to the extent that Cowser does. He can rope a line drive down the left field line as well as anybody. He can pull one out to right center field and hit a home run. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being the left-handed hitter on the Orioles this year who scales the Mount Waldemar, or whatever we're calling it now, the left field wall, because he's got that kind of power. He can take a pitch the other way. So that's something to really keep an eye on. But the defense has looked great. And I go back to a point that I've made on here before about Cowser, which is that the Orioles were forced, I think, to use him in ways they didn't plan on using him in the major leagues last year. I don't think they wanted him playing center field as much as he did. I don't think he would have gotten as many at-bats as he had if not for Cedric Mullins and Aaron Hicks both being hurt. Aaron Hicks was there kind of as the buffer, if you will, that could have helped ease Cowser in, and he ends up getting hurt. So this year, with a good spring training, Cowser has been able to build off of the adjustments he made in the minor leagues when he went back down there last year, and the power is really coming through.
Yeah, you look at his hard hit rate, 57.7%. It's 97th percentile in baseball. average exit velo 93.1 miles per hour. That's 91st percentile in baseball right now. And you look at some of his average numbers right now, about half of the number of batted balls, a little more than half the number of batted balls that he had in his short stint last year in the majors. But that average exit velo is up about 6 miles per hour. His max EV is up from 107.7 to 113.6 miles per hour. Like, he's hitting the ball, he's launching the ball more, he's hitting the ball harder. That hard hit rate of almost 60% is absurd. Like, yeah, I think that's two things. Maybe he's not sitting here at like 97th percentile in all of baseball on hard hit percentage, or 91st percentile on average exit velo 3 months from now, but I imagine he doesn't dip too much. I think like the power numbers there, I think those are going to remain pretty consistent. I don't see that power going away too much. And talking about he went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts tonight. That's baseball. It happens. It happens to everybody at least once in a year, right? But the other night, I don't remember exactly what game it was, but Ben McDonald even made a comment. I think he laid off a pitch. I want to say it was like a two-strike pitch, like a fastball up and in or something. And Ben McDonald made a remark that said, last year, Cowser's swinging at that. He's swinging and missing at that. He's striking out. And this year he's laying off. So I think that's some of the things, the adjustments you're seeing him make. Even apparently he made the adjustment with his hands to help better get to off-speed pitches and breaking pitches. And right now, I don't think he faced, I don't have Monday night's numbers, so these are probably changed. But going into Monday night's game, he was hitting 500 against breaking pitches with 2 doubles and a home run. Like, give it a few more weeks to see these numbers kind of stabilize, but that's a pretty good start. And when it comes to fastballs, he had a 30% whiff rate against fastballs last year. That was down to 19% coming into Monday night. So I think all this stuff is going to be pretty sustainable for Cowser. I don't think it's like a flash in the pan type thing here with him.
Yeah, Dowdy's going to have 1,300 OPS by the time the year ends. But yeah, I think you're totally right. He's kind of found that happy medium where I think he got caught last year where more contact oriented, he couldn't hit for the extra bases that he wanted. And then he tried to focus more on hitting for power and was swinging and missing a lot. And it seems just like he's really comfortable. It seems like he's really found his sweet spot. And look, he's going to be a guy that strikes out because obviously he's playing more for the impact. And that's what the Orioles preach all the way from when they draft these guys until they get up to the majors. They preach the impacting the ball, the high exit velocities. And what do you know? All these guys come up. Gunnar is like 99th percentile in average exit velocity. Cowser's up there. Westberg crushes the ball consistently. And I think you're just going to see that when Mayo comes up, Kursak comes up, all these guys, they hit the ball extremely hard, and Cowser's one of them. And yeah, it's just going to lead to good results. So I'm very happy that he's doing what he's doing. Silence the doubters, and I'm sure they'll come out of the woodwork tonight after his performance. But you're just going to have to live with like around 30% strikeout rate with Cowser, maybe a little bit less in an ideal world, but that's not going to slow him down whatsoever.
No, absolutely. I agree. And we'll move on now to talk about Jackson Holliday, who made his major league debut when the Orioles were in Fenway Park last week. And it has been a little bit of a slow start for Holliday. It took until Sunday for him to collect his first hit. Big moment, though, in a win against the Brewers as he hit a single. With his 0 for 4 performance on Monday night included, so far Holliday is 1 for 19 in the major leagues, which is a .53 batting average with 3 runs scored. Bob, I'll go back to you to start here. It's been, a little bit of a slow go, but we've seen this before. We saw it with Adley Rutzman in 2022. We saw it with Gunnar Henderson when he made his full season, was playing in the major leagues for a full season for the first time in 2023. And we even saw it with Colton Cowser in his first stint. With that in mind, how do you think Holliday has looked to this point if you kind of pick apart his performance?
I'd say in his first 4 games, he looked extremely overwhelmed. He was not himself, I would say, at the plate. I think so much pressure, 20 years old, like just turned 20 4 months ago. He's got all this pressure. His dad is in the house, all the media attention. And obviously he carries himself more mature than his age. And he didn't let it show really, but I feel like his at-bats is where you could tell. He was swinging at the first pitch a lot. I think he was just really trying to jump on the ball, get that first hit out of the way, but that led to him starting almost, I swear, at least 80% of his at-bats in the first 4 games started 0-2 in the count, and that's just never a good position to be in as a hitter. I don't care who you are. Because he's got a great eye and great approach, he would work the counts back in his favor before striking out like 60% of the time. But he actually got ahead of the count in his with his first hit in the 8th inning of Sunday's game, and then ripped a single into right field. And I'd say today he was 0 for 4 with the strikeout tonight, but his at bats looked much more accustomed to what we're seeing, where he was being a little bit more patient, hitting the ball. He actually hit the ball in the air relatively hard, the opposite field for a fly out in his first at bat. I just think now let's judge him from this point on. Like, I think he's going to settle in fairly quickly, especially for his age. And in a month or so, we'll be saying, okay, here's the prospect we knew we're getting what we have, and then we can bring up Kobe Mayo or Heston Kjerstad or someone else to let them get acclimated to the majors. I think that's the pattern that we're going to see this year. And yeah, I think every time there are people that will say, what a bust. Oh, I knew they rushed him, even though they were the ones that were pissed that he didn't start the year on the major league roster. And it's just funny to watch these guys every time. And then inevitably in 2 months, when they're adjusted and performing the way we expect them to, then they're their biggest fans again. So
it's the circle of life for the more casual fan, right? You learn about hot new prospect, you see he's playing well, you demand to be called up. You watch him struggle initially, and then you demand he get sent back down and tweet something like, "I told you he wasn't ready. He needs more development time." I've never watched minor league baseball in my life, but I tell you, that kid needs more development time. He's only 20 years old. He ain't Manny Machado. Like, okay. He doesn't need more development time. Like, what more can you learn going up against quad A arms? Like, how many quality left-handers? I've heard other people make this point. I'm stealing it. Not an original thought here, but how many like high quality lefty pitchers are you going to face in AAA? Like, those guys are in the majors, the good ones. Teams aren't going to let you just languish in AAA. So I don't know. You hear this so many times too about players in the system, is that how the Orioles have developed this culture where it's perfectly okay to fail and fall flat on your face. And they want their young players to be uncomfortable. When they start getting too comfy at a level, they push them up to the next level. They kind of like feed them to the wolves. But there's also this really massive support system in place to help pick them up when they fail. And with Holliday, like he's going to settle in defensively. He's going to learn how to work with the rest of the infield. That communication between himself, the other infielders, the communication with the outfielders, Santander, Mullins, whoever else is in right field, that's going to get better as they all get more reps and get more comfortable together. I also think part of this is, I do agree with what Bob said. Jackson Holliday can say what he wants, but he's a 20-year-old kid making his MLB debut with all the pressure in the world on him. And like those media scrum photos before his debut, like that is insane. Like, how do you're in Norfolk playing, which I made that comment today. Why do you let that kid go back to Norfolk? Because they were in Charlotte. You let him go back to Norfolk for like a day, and then he's got to pack up after that game. Was that Tuesday night? Then he like traveled to Richmond, went from Richmond to Boston, and then he's in Boston. He's like, I haven't even had caffeine today, which I get it. I don't know if I would need caffeine either when I'm about to make my MLB debut, but it just seemed like a lot for opening day. Then you're on the road. I don't know. For me with Holliday, I feel like another point to add to that is that if I'm a pitcher, I don't want to be on the Jackson Holliday highlight reel when he hits his first home run or he starts to settle in, because like, yes, some of it's nerves and the fact that he's 20 years old in the big leagues, but there's also this fact that these pitchers are probably giving him some of their nastiest stuff. And there's a little bit more umph in those pitches that he's giving them because they want to have that moment where they say, hit it, kid, come hit it, rookie. Like, you're in the big leagues now. You're not facing other teams like Bruce Zimmerman's. Like, you're facing real high quality all-star starters here. The game will slow down for him. He will adjust. I think he's going to be perfectly fine. Even if it takes a couple more weeks, he's going to be fine. But the Orioles would not have promoted him if they didn't think he was fully ready to be challenged at the next level. And that does mean some failure is going to come along the way.
I will say he's getting fed a ton of breaking stuff, not getting a lot of fastballs. And I think that's that's where the early 0-1, 0-2 counts. He's probably expecting, okay, I'm going to jump on fastball early, and then it's a nasty changeup or slider, and he's missing. But the league adjusts to him. He'll adjust back, and he's going to be perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bob, just to build on the point you just made, I'm looking into Pitt's data, and I think this was current before Monday's game. 48.48.5% of the pitches he's seen so far, according to Baseball Savant, have been fastballs. 36.4% have been breaking balls. So he's getting fed a pretty steady diet of breaking balls right now, and that's going to be one of the hardest things for a hitter to adjust to. And the other issue too is that he probably has not been in a situation in a long time, if ever, where he's seeing this many breaking balls and falling behind in the count pretty much every at bat. At least early on he was. We're starting to see him get ahead a little bit more now, but that's, a series of adjustments he's going to have to go through. Ultimately, he's going to be fine. You can see flashes of it here and there where he has such an advanced plate approach for his age, and you can tell he has a really good head on his shoulders. I don't worry about him not being able to rebound from a bad 2 weeks or a bad month. I'm going to transition to this point, though, with Holliday, because I was thinking about over the weekend. This is now the third consecutive year that we've had a high-profile debut, or really, I guess, third consecutive season, maybe. If you count Cowser last year, you count Gunnar at the beginning of last year. Adley in 2022, Gunnar and Cowser in 2023, and then Holliday this year. Is it fair to say that while the expectations for some of those players, in particular Rutzman and Henderson, were really high when they were coming up, that the expectations for Holliday are even higher, that he maybe has more eyes on him than any Orioles prospect we've seen in a long time, if ever?
I would say 1,000% yes. I think Gunnar, at least he got that taste at the end of 2022. And, he actually got off to a decent start, probably just because he was in the middle of or at the end of a really, really successful season. And then the league had a chance to adjust to him over the offseason. Adley was obviously big, but the Orioles were not expected to be good, and they weren't good until after he came up. So I think that took off a little bit this year or that year. Holliday, though, he's got the name value. That fact that he's, again, just turned 20 years old, was the first pick in the draft only less than 2 years ago. And we're a 101 win team that's trying to win the World Series again. And people are expecting him to be a big part of it. The way that he performed in spring training might have backfired on him, at least as far as like we're saying the built up expectations go. So I would definitely say easily yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was a full year younger, at least, than Gunnar Henderson was when Gunnar made his MLB debut. And this wasn't us. I feel like we were playing catch up with the Jackson Holliday hype coming into this season. It's like you had MLB Pipeline, Jim Callis over at MLB Pipeline on national media and podcasts saying that at this point in his career, like going back to late last year or this offseason, I don't remember exactly when he first came out with this statement, but making statements like, at this point in his career, Jackson Holliday was a better prospect than Gunnar Henderson ever was. And so I think that adds to that pressure there. There was a lot more hype with Holliday coming up. And Gunnar Gunnar was a good prospect when the Orioles drafted him, obviously. But it took him a while to develop into that top prospect. He made tremendous gains those last little bit in the minor leagues. But Holliday, I feel like from the jump, we're expecting tremendous things. We're watching how many people were flocking down to Sarasota to watch every single FCL at bat. It was a little bit different with him. And Adley, I feel like you had the defense to fall back on. Adley could get behind the plate, and even though he wasn't hitting, even though he wasn't showcasing the power, he was still up there calling a tremendous game. The Orioles were winning baseball games when Adley was behind the plate. The pitcher's ERA difference with Adley behind the plate versus when he wasn't behind the plate was very noticeable, and that made a huge impact to this team. But with Holliday, the expectations are just through the roof to begin the season, and he will begin to live up to them. I still have no doubts. I mean, you look at some of his numbers too, like The kid last year in AA had a 20% strikeout rate, and in AAA he had 18.7% strikeout rate, and in AAA this year is 14.3%. Like those are all smaller sample size. Even in high A, he had a 20% strikeout rate. Like that's going to go up, probably be somewhere between 22, 23, 24% strikeout rate in the big leagues when he settles in, not the 60% strikeout rate that he's at right now. It's going to stabilize, and it's not going to be a terrible strikeout rate. And he's going to start walking because that's what he did extremely well in the minor leagues throughout his career. So give him a few more weeks, let him settle in. I have no worries there with Holliday.
Yeah, with Gunnar, like you said, we had a chance to see his development play out with Jackson, excuse me. I feel like he moved too quick. We can never just settle in and get a great idea of what he was, because like you said, they were challenging him every step of the way. He would master a level in like a month or two and then get moved up again. But I will say it was surreal to have Cowser, Westberg, Holliday, flip the lineup, Gunnar, Adley, 5 in a row, just these stud prospects. It's surreal, and it's awesome because we followed these guys from the very beginning, all of them, and it's just going to continue to get better and better on that front for us.
And if you go to those Brewers games real quick, sorry, Zach, if you go to those Brewers games real quick, you also had DL Hall and Joey Ortiz on the opposite major league roster. Like, talk about player development. And that was weird. I was not anticipating how weird it was going to be. I watched DL Hall's first 2 outings he had before he faced the Orioles. I watched him, had fun, cheered him on. I know they weren't great, but I thought this is cool. I watched Joey Ortiz in a Brewers game. Thought it was cool, but when you watching him pitch in a Brewers uniform at Camden Yards, that was weird as hell.
It hurt.
But yeah,
to see Joey. I mean, love that he was performing well, but just to see him play well in the field, get all those hits, I'm not gonna lie, it hurt a little bit.
Yeah. But point being, that was a lot of homegrown Orioles talent on the same field at the same time, and that's pretty cool to see.
I was at Camden Yards night for the really, really bad 10-1 loss against the Brewers, and seeing Joey Ortiz hit that triple was bittersweet. I was happy for him, but it's like, all right, well, now it's kind of dumping out, but good for him and good for DL Hall as well to get the chances they deserve. But going back to Jackson Holliday for a moment, the final point I would make about him is that don't read a lot into the strikeout to walk numbers initially. Probably not even for the first half of the year, because for a variety of reasons, while I pay close attention to them in the minor leagues, I tend to toss them out the window for hitters and pitchers when they're coming up to the majors and trying to assess them, because there's a lot of reasons why those numbers are going to go in a different direction. And looking at hitters specifically, we just talked about it. Holliday has not seen the quality of breaking balls that he's seeing right now. He's not seen the high level of lefties that he is seeing right now. And then there's small little things that you have to factor in. You're moving from a completely different environment, the way that pitches are called at the AAA level, to having human umpires who, let's face it, probably don't give a lot of borderline pitches to rookies. You can tell sometimes. You watch a game, you got a rookie at the plate, and he's down 1-2 in the count. Ball just a little bit off the plate that for a veteran hitter might be called a ball. It's called a strike. It's just little things like that add up.
Ask Wyatt Langford about that with Angel Hernandez behind the plate. That was awful. 3-0 count, 3 sliders that were like a foot off the plate. Strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. And also, it's also a big adjustment now because in the minors, these guys have every Monday off. They're in one city for 6 consecutive days, whereas you get to the majors and it's road trips and 3 games at a time and more travel. And obviously, you're compensated for that. You're making a lot more money when you're there, but it's just also an adjustment of just lifestyle as well.
Yeah. I want to make one more point real quick, and that's said before the season. I think Bob, I think you put your money where your mouth was on this, but I did say before the season started that it's April 15th. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves here yet. But I did say before the season started that if I were to bet, you put the money on Colton Cowser win Rookie of the Year, which I think you actually did. I think I saw the screenshot in the Discord. Smart bet. hopefully that does continue, but it'll be interesting race between Cowser and Jackson Holliday. But I did say before the season that smart money has put the money on Cowser because he keeps hitting the ball hard like this and putting up those home run numbers. He's going to be in serious consideration. But I do wonder, now talking through Jackson Holliday, I almost wonder if because he's coming off to this really slow start, I wonder if he starts to settle in and has like this Gunnar Henderson type season arc like Gunnar had last year. I could see Jackson Holliday kind of running away with this fairly easily. Again, haven't really checked in on the Texas guys in the last couple of days, so I don't know what they're doing, but I almost wonder if this bad start, quote unquote bad start for Holliday is going to work to his advantage a little bit later in the year.
Yeah, certainly did for Gunnar. I know. Yeah, I'm feeling myself because I posted the clip from our preseason prediction with Connor here, where I called the debut off by like 12 hours. So I was feeling myself, and I did place the bet on Cowser in the offseason for plus 5,000. I did $5 on it. Wish I would have put a little bit more on that at this point, but yeah, now he's all the way down to like plus 320 or something like that. So yeah, hopefully that cashes. But hey, it doesn't matter to me. If an Oriole wins, I'll be happy.
And we'll be, of course, following that Rookie of the Year race all season long here on Orioles on the Verge. That does it for this episode. We will be back later this week to talk about pitching in the minor leagues. Several prospects are off to great starts on the mound. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into their successes. In the meantime, you can find us on our multitude of social media channels, including Facebook, X, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up. Today, you can join for as little as $3 a month. And at the $5 and $10 levels, you'll have access to bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and I as we look at all things Orioles minor leagues. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to dive into some of the pitching success stories that we are seeing in the minor leagues so far. We're just about 2 weeks or so into the minor league season, but so far our prediction of the year of the pitcher is really looking good thanks to dominant starts of the year from pitchers ranging from Cade Pilovitz to Moises Chase to Riley Cooper. We got a lot to dig into tonight, and I'm going to start off right away with Bob's choice because I find it interesting that Bob went to Delmarva. Delmarva right now has won just one game. They're sitting at 1-8. Entering this week's action. Yet it doesn't really tell the whole story of how they're performing because their starting pitchers actually look pretty good right now. And Bob's going to highlight a couple of those arms.
Yeah, I'd say their starting pitching looks fantastic. Even the guys that have like some higher ERAs, they still have like great strikeout to walk numbers. And yeah, so I went with a pairing of guys who are very similar in one way and very different in other ways. And that would be Blake Money, the right-handed pitcher out of LSU, and Riley Cooper, the left-handed pitcher out of LSU. Blake Money, he was money. That's terrible. And I'm sure there will be terrible puns with his name for his entire career. We talked about his brother Cash Money. That's a little on the nose, but he so far has a 5.63 ERA, but that's over 8 innings, he has 12 strikeouts and only 1 walk. He gave up 2 home runs in his second game. So I would say he's pitching even better than that ERA would indicate. His stuff looks great. The command looks good. And then in the other side of things, Riley Cooper, the lefty, who looks like an older Creed Willems if he was a pitcher on the mound and threw left-handed. Over 6 2/3 innings, he's given up 9 hits, 0 walks, and 10 strikeouts to a 1.35 ERA. And these were both guys who, at least I figured, again, relief pitchers. Okay, these guys are interesting relief arms, 1 or 2 inning stints here in the Orioles system. And then they start the year in the rotation. Cooper's second game, I think, he came out of the bullpen, but he still was stretched out and threw multiple innings like he was a starter. And yeah, I think all of a sudden they went from like guys who are at the back end of a top 100 or just like an interesting arm not on my personal top 100 to all of a sudden I'm like, okay, do I consider these guys for the top 50? And I've at least moved them up a little bit because very intriguing stuff. And again, they could still be relievers long term, but right now they're on the Alex fan path, and I like to see it.
Yeah, Blake Money he throws in the mid 90s and he throws a lot of strikes. Like that's gonna play as he moves up this organization. The walk he had in his last outing was the first walk of his pro career. So he's got 17 and 2/3 innings, and he's walked just one guy so far since the Orioles drafted him out of LSU. I like Blake Money. Riley Cooper intrigues the hell out of me, not just because he's listed at 270 pounds, and he is every bit of that, if not a little bit more. It's not the beard, which it is a caveman beard. It is a Bud Light. Give me a Bud Light at the end of a hard day beard. He's got the flowing locks as well coming out the back of the baseball hat. I love this guy's mound presence. He shows some energy. He shows some fire. I remember watching him at LSU. He had like 3 or 4 saves. He had 3 saves in that College World Series that they won. The guy is just a bulldog late in games for LSU. I don't know how deep his pitch mix is. I think he's primarily like fastball slider type guy. I don't think he has super high velo either, but it seems like it's stuff that really plays up well. But you look at his time at LSU, he struck out a lot of guys. He did not walk a lot of guys at all in college. So I think that's pretty interesting moving forward. And he threw more pitches yesterday than Michael Ferret did. It was Sunday. Michael Ferret got the start. Riley Cooper, like you mentioned, came in relief. And Cooper ended up throwing more pitches than Ferret, which I thought was interesting because I assumed Riley Cooper was strictly a relief prospect. And I've mentioned before what you do when you assume a guy's going to be a relief pitcher in this organization. The Orioles throw a curveball at you and say, we're going to stretch him out as a starter. And I mentioned this in this morning's daily for Patreons that I was kind of trying to search some more stuff on Riley Cooper. And I did find a note from someone on Twitter, some draft guys talking about Riley Cooper leading up to the draft and what his draft prospects were. And the conversation basically got to like, Cooper could be a guy that in the right organization, they stretch him out because at LSU, there are typically so many arms. There's only 3 weekend spots on a college rotation. So there's so few starting innings to go around, but LSU is typically loaded with so many quality arms that guys just don't get a chance to be stretched out. And could Cooper in the right organization with his pitch metrics and his really good command, could he be a guy that gets stretched out to be a starter? It seems like the Orioles want to at least experiment with that moving forward. I mean, we'll see. He's like 6'2", 6'3", 270. So we'll see how that could hold up in a starter's role. But man, he's just so much fun to watch right now. I don't even care how high he goes in the organization. I just want to watch this guy pitch every single week right now.
Yeah, obviously extremely small sample size, but Riley Cooper, 34.5% strikeout rate, 0% walk rate. Blake Money, 36.4% strikeout rate, 3% walk rate. Those numbers will play.
I had a chance to watch Cooper start against Salem last Tuesday. And while, a lot of the angles I was seeing were from behind home plate, it was hard to really see how the pitches were moving. You could see enough to know that his breaking stuff just drops off the table. Hitters can't square up on it. It's got some good movement down late in the zone. And I think that he's going to really be successful this year because of that he can put those pitches wherever he wants them. And then Money, with his velocity and with the fact that his command is so good, to me, he could be one of the big breakout candidates for this season. So I'm really excited to see what he does the rest of the way.
Yeah, I do think it's unfair that they're both pitching in low A, but still, for me, like they're older college guys facing younger international prospects for the most part. But the walk to strikeout numbers, like that's what I'm paying most close attention to. Keep piling up those strikeouts, keep limiting those walks. And I mean, at the same time, where are you going to put them though? Like you can't just move up to Aberdeen because there are no innings to go around in Aberdeen right now. We'll talk about some arms in Aberdeen, which might have the best group of pitchers in this entire organization. Aberdeen is must-watch TV every single night on the minor league side of things go. But yeah, it's at least this is an opportunity to just get them stretched out and let's see if they have some starters potential down there. And if Yeah, just keep. Hopefully, those strikeout numbers and walk numbers stay consistent. And if they keep working deeper and deeper into games, they're throwing 60, 70, maybe even up to 80 pitches an outing. I'm even more intrigued by these guys.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of these guys won't be in Delmarva for too long, but then you have to. It's just the pipeline is so clogged. It's like AAA. You have McDermott, Povich, and Armbruster. They're not going anywhere. Double A loaded, high A loaded, low A loaded. So eventually they'll all move up, but I don't know if they're going to be in a huge rush.
We'll go to Nick now because he's going to highlight some of those arms at Aberdeen.
Let's move up the ladder. Let's talk about Moises Chase first, because I feel like a lot of people are talking about Moises Chase right now. A guy who I know when I was at other websites, some that we were at together, I wrote a lot about Chase. Someone who I know early on when we started the show in 2020, he was an arm I feel like we highlighted a lot as a guy in the lower levels of the minor leagues that intrigued us. I don't remember if I feel like he was a top 30 in some of our early lists, or maybe he always just missed. I feel like him and Raul Rangel maybe always just missed our list. And so we always did like that, the guys who just missed list show before the season started. And we always would talk about Chase and Rangel. Well, Rangel is no longer in the organization, unfortunately, but Chase, the kid's in high A, and he's got 15 strikeouts to 2 walks in 8 innings, no runs allowed, which is phenomenal right now. He's 20 years old, so he's 2 years younger than the competition, which shout out on Twitter. Somebody commented, it's kind of mind blowing how you talk about like Chase is doing so well in high A at 20 and is so much younger than the competition, but Jackson Holliday is 20 in the major leagues, which go back to our previous episode about Jackson Holliday. But yeah, Chase is just pitching extremely well. I did not expect to see him pitch this well this early on after getting the bump up to Aberdeen. And I know Steve Molesky had a tweet after Sunday night's game, passing along some notes from a scout who was there. He said Chase was up to 95.5 miles per hour yesterday, spinning it well, getting whiffs primarily on this four-seamer and his changeup. Like, I feel like every year we always say going into the year that Aberdeen doesn't have the sexiest pitching staff to start the year, but this is where we see an arm or two really pop. And it looks like Moises Chase is one of these guys who is popping so far this year because, my God, nobody is touching him so far in his first 2 outings.
I could not be more excited for Moises Chase. I mean, I was saying before the show started, like my 2 eyeball emojis of the year so far on the minor league side were Frederick Bencosme on the offensive side and Moises Chase on the pitching front. I mean, we've always kind of put Chase, Davy Cruz, Juan De Los Santos, and maybe Edgar Portis in like the same bucket. Well, Chase is no longer in that bucket, at least for me. He has put himself firmly ahead of those guys with his start. And it's not just because, he pitched good for these 8 innings. I'm telling you, the stuff has always been electric, but he's always had really high walk rates. He 12, 15, and 17.5% walk rates the last few years. It's only been getting worse and worse. But I think we noted last year, especially in the summer before he was kind of shut down with maybe a minor injury or just they wanted to just limit his innings at some point, that the command was starting to get better for all of those guys that I just listed off before. But it's 6.9% walk rate so far. If he can keep any semblance of this command that he's showing right now, he's going to be just bursting up the ladder here. I think he's going to be, we talk about Luis De Leon a lot as a fantastic pitching prospect, and we will continue to do so very shortly. But Moises Chase is 2 months younger than Luis De Leon and dominating Aberdeen in his first 2 appearances, while Luis De Leon is still in Delmarva, probably not for long, but he is there. Chase is a absolute stud. His stuff looks electric. Thank you, Aberdeen, for installing some nice cameras. Got great looks of his pitches. 2-seamer, 4-seamer, slider. It tunnels. It's like I'm feeling Gene Pinto 2021 vibes right now with Moises Chase.
When I watch Chase pitch this year, I see a possible future major league starter, which is not something I would have necessarily said last year, even on his good outings, because Yeah, it was often he'd have to get by on 1 or 2 pitches. His command was always shaky. And this year, he's coming out throwing mid to upper 90s. First of all, that's in April. This is the time of year where I don't really pay attention to velocity readings because I expect the fastball is going to be down a couple of ticks early on. Right now, he's pretty consistently 94 to 96. He's also mixing in a sweeper that looks excellent. That is a real out pitch for him. The changeup looks good. He's got a two-seam fastball that he can throw.
Mm, we lose him.
I think we might have.
He was going in and out there.
On the two-seamer. Yeah, I don't know. Did he always have the four-seamer and the nope? Nick, you would know. Did he have this two-seamer last year?
I'd have to go back.
I don't remember him having two distinct fastballs the way he's throwing right now.
No, I'm pretty sure we wrote about him up. I'd have to visit the old stomping grounds to see what I wrote about him. But yeah, if he's got like a 4 or 5 pitch mix now, that's going to be pretty devastating, I think. And it really wasn't, like you mentioned, it was just the walks because he had like 100 strikeouts. I don't have his page up in front of me. I want to say like 100 strikeouts in 60 something innings last year in Delmarva. The strikeouts were never an issue. It was the walks, but they went down tremendously as the season progressed last year. And then he had multiple injuries the last 2 years, and it was never anything serious. But it was always just like when he tripped on the mound and he missed, I think, a couple of weeks after that, because a freak injury. It was always just those small little injuries that piled up that caused him to miss so much time. I'm just glad he's pitching so well right now in Aberdeen. But we can, Zach hopefully comes. Nope, he's not moving again. We'll move to the other guy real quick, Luis De Leon, so we'll go back down to Delmarva for this one. But I wanted to hide De Leon because I feel like, honestly, he was the breakout guy last year, one of the big breakouts in the system last year. And this year, he's getting completely overshadowed, I feel like, with all the pitching in Bowie and Delmarva and Aberdeen. But De Leon's made 2 starts now. So again, we preface all of this with small sample size, but 7 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts for De Leon. So strikeout rate of 31%. Walks were an issue for him last year. He walked 14% of batters he faced last year. He's at 7% right now through 2 starts. So that is a promising start. And the ground ball numbers, 62% ground ball rate this year. It was 73% last year in Delmarva, 63% in the FCL, 64% in the DSL the year before. Those are absurd numbers for a starting pitcher. And I think someone asked, why was he still in low A? And honestly, I think it's just innings because there are younger arms, like we just talked about Chase at Aberdeen. And you got guys like Juan De Los Santos, who are, 21, 22 years old above him in high A. But all those guys had a ton of innings in Delmarva over the last 2 years. And they need to be challenged now in high A if the organization still believes in them. De Leon had just 26 innings last year in Delmarva, so I think 2 months in low A isn't going to be a huge issue. He just turned 21 yesterday, Sunday, so he could find himself finishing the year in Aberdeen and then pushing to start 2025 in AA a few weeks before he turns 22 years old as a left-handed pitching prospect who received a couple $1,000 signing bonus. He's getting overshadowed, but don't overlook Luis De Leon in his starts of the year.
Not in the slightest. I mean, I think it's underreported or at least underrecognized, especially by me, the ground ball rate. I did not even realize he was getting almost a 75% ground ball rate last year in Delmarva to go along with a strikeout percentage approaching 30. This is like prime relief closer Zach Britton as a starting pitcher. Pretty phenomenal. So yeah, love De Leon is just doing what he's doing. He's improved on his numbers from last year. The strikeout rate, again, it's very small sample size, is right about the same as it was last year. The walk rate has been cut in half so far early on. So can't complain whatsoever. And I look forward to seeing him. I'm going to make a point to get out to Aberdeen sometime soon, hopefully to see Chase and Luis De Leon a little bit later in the year when he gets inevitably called up.
I've made this point before, and I firmly believe it's true that De Leon has the elements of a top 100 prospect. Hard fastball from the left side, to go with a slider and a changeup. Those two pitches are behind the fastball in terms of his development. But when they catch up, which I'm pretty confident they're going to, look out, because he just is so. First of all, I think he's beyond his age skill wise. And while I trust the Orioles development plan, and I'm sure that there's a lot of reasons that don't have to do with performance for the fact that he's in Delmarva, because as we've discussed tonight, you've only got so many guys to give innings to. That's true at Aberdeen. It's true at Bowie as well. So you need to see some movement up. But I just don't see him being challenged at low A at all this year. I really think that the next big move for him has to be a promotion to Aberdeen, and hopefully sooner rather than later, because he's so far looking like he's going to simply overmatch low A hitters. When last year he came up and it was a nice story, and for a pitcher being as young as he was, his command looked pretty good. But this year, I think he's taken it to another level. So I hope that he's in Aberdeen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think someone else pointed this out last year that it's the changeup was the separator, though. Like, yeah, it's not as good. Might not be as good as a fastball right now, but the fact that he had it and he commanded it so well and it was so effective last year at 20 years old in low A, that was huge for him. And I was trying to think as Zach was talking there, how many, if he's throwing like what, 95, 96 miles an hour from the left side, are there any other lefties in the system who throw harder than that? Like, I don't know. Povich is what, 93, 94. Like, Luis De Leon might be the hardest throwing lefty that the Orioles have down in the minor leagues. So, and he's a flamethrower.
It's a good point. Yeah, I'm trying to do a quick scan, and I'm not coming up with much there on that front.
Yeah, because most of the lefties in the Orioles system are kind of, you kind of look at in tiers where you have a lot of guys that are in the similar buckets like Davy Cruz, Juan Rojas, who are probably low 90s, maybe occasionally touch the mid 90s. Then you have Povich, who's consistently mid 90s. And then De Leon is above him. And I don't think there's anybody else in that tier where you're going to be throwing fastballs 95, 96 miles per hour and being able to sustain it a little bit in his starts, which is important to see because we can see guys spike the fastball up here and there. You're seeing with Cole Irvin in the major leagues right now. But can you sustain it throughout a whole game? And I think as De Leon develops, he's going to be able to.
Yeah, the only guy I could think is let's keep an eye on Francisco Morale this year. Should start in the FCL. Maybe he's a lefty. Maybe he's added a tick or two, and then he can get up to Delmarva this year, and we can see what he's got. But yeah, Luis De Leon. So right now is standing on his own.
One more point real quick before we got to talk about especially one of Zach's guys here, because we missed talking about him last week when we should have. But it's early. We get excited with everybody starting. But remember last year, Luis De Leon pitched that one inning at the game right before the trade deadline, and we thought he was getting traded. I'm convinced myself that the Cardinals really wanted Luis De Leon, and the Orioles were maybe able to push them towards Zach Showalter. If that is the case, I don't know if it is or not, but it was just weird timing. Thank God he was not included as part of that deal. But
yeah, unless it was Jordan Montgomery was maybe that's who would have gone if we would have got him. But yeah, I'm happy he's still here. That's for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'll go to my pitchers now, and I've got three guys I want to highlight. I'm going to start off with Cameron Weston, who delivered one of the best starts to this young season we've seen by any Orioles minor leaguer last week against Wilmington. 5 no-hit innings. The only batter to reach base did so on a hit by pitch against Weston with 9 strikeouts to no walks. And when we've talked about Weston in the past, which we've talked about him a lot since he came off the IL last summer, it's always been about he's got a really deep pitch mix. He has this changeup that moves in this really unique way. But his fastball, I've come to the conclusion that it's an underrated pitch because while the velocity isn't necessarily there, he's not going to overpower hitters. It has such good late movement. It's got that good hoppy movement that we know the Orioles really look for in their pitchers. And you could see in this start against Wilmington, fastball coming in, able to dart up at the last minute. It's a good pitch. And when he's able to locate it like he was in that start, he can mix in any of his other pitches and be successful. And so far, we just talked about how De Leon doesn't really belong in Delmarva, or maybe doesn't belong in Delmarva development-wise. Weston's in the same boat at Aberdeen. I was kind of surprised that he was not on Bowie's roster to start the year, and I have to think that he's going to be one of the first guys up.
Yeah. He just knows how to pitch, man. He knows how to mix his pitches and take advantage of that. The changeup is the highlight. I think he could honestly just be an elite reliever in a few years, but there's no reason not to have him starting games because he's pitching fantastically over multiple innings. And until proven otherwise, I think you just keep doing that. And yeah, if he's going to have 5 or 6 pitches and be able to control him the way he has been last year and so far this year, then he's a dude.
Yeah, always been a guy that I've been intrigued by since the Orioles drafted him, but we just never really been able to watch him for an extended period of time because he just had a couple innings after he got drafted. And then he was shut down last year because he had tendonitis. I don't remember if it was elbow or shoulder, but I'm pretty sure it was tendonitis, what we found out. But he started late and only had 40 innings. So that was like piggyback innings that he ended up getting. So he's still sporting this year in high A. I don't hate that he's in high A right now because it's giving him a chance to stretch out, get some of those innings, work deeper into games. And he's still sporting that 55% ground ball rate and keeping the ball in the yard. And that's kind of why I think I do think he gets moved up to Bowie soon. He's a college guy. They drafted him out of Michigan. So even though he might be a little bit behind in terms of getting innings under his belt, he's an older, more experienced arm. And I could see him potentially being a guy who works his way to the big leagues as a really fun bullpen option. And I know the goal this offseason was to bulk up and add more velo. I'm not sure exactly what he's throwing right now, but if he adds a few more ticks to his fastball and continues to post those impressive like ground ball numbers, like not late this year, probably late next year, but late next year, Cameron Weston's a guy who I'm looking at as that's a guy you potentially bring up late in the year as a bullpen option in the major leagues, I think.
Oh, I could absolutely see it. It's just, I feel like he's going to be one of those guys that as he gets to levels, he's going to be able to adjust quickly. So I would not rule that out at all. I'll go to my next guy, and it's someone we talk about a lot on the show, and we talk about him a lot for good reason. He's a good pitcher. He has good stuff. But I thought it would be worth checking in on Trace Bright tonight. And so far, Bright has made 2 appearances with the Bay Sox, 2 starts. First outing, 3 2/3 scoreless, strikes out 6. And his parts of it weren't great. 5 innings, 3 runs, all of them earned, 8 hits. He gave up 2 homers. But the big thing for me is that he got through that start without a walk. And so far this season, he has 14 strikeouts to just 2 walks. One of the things we saw with Bright last year was that he hit a little bit of a rough patch. I think it was in May with Aberdeen to start last year, and his command would just get away from him some outings. He could go out one start and look really good and then come back out the next one and issue a lot of walks. That calmed down a little bit as we went into the summer, and it carried over to some extent when he got the late season promotion to Bowie. But it really does look like he's continuing to refine his command. And I think that that's ultimately going to be the X factor in determining what his ceiling is going to be at the major league level, because there's no question when you look at the fastball most nights, that is a big league pitch. But it's always been, going back to his days at Auburn, is he going to be able to develop enough of a repertoire outside the fastball to be successful? And not only is he doing that right now, but I think he's doing that to the point where it's a lot easier to envision him developing as a starter than it was this time last year.
My Trace Bright for minor league pitcher of the year prediction becomes more and more true through these first 2 starts. I love it. I do agree that coming into the year, I think it was safe to say, like, when you're trying to think of and dream on what is Trace Bright's ceiling in this organization, it was always limited by the control, because he had the 13% walk rate in high A and 11% walk rate in double A. So like you mentioned, it did get better. 2%, that's an improvement. It's at 5% walk rate right now through his first 2 outings with a strikeout rate of 37.8%, 14 strikeouts to 2 walks in 8 2/3 innings. That's a fantastic start to the season. because we've talked about this before. With a lot of these pitchers, we've seen them get to AA and we see them throw more strikes. They're forced to live in the zone more because guys aren't going to chase your junk anymore now that you're getting into the AA and the upper levels of the minor leagues. So they're being forced to live in the zone more. And typically we've seen the dip in strikeouts from a lot of guys. But Bright, through 2 starts at least, is getting more strikeouts, which I think is another great sign of his. And I just feel like, as big of a Trace Bright guy as I am, I am so anxious to see if he can eliminate some of that Cade Povich inconsistency that he showed last year, because, and you touched on that as well. We'll talk about Cade Povich in a second, but I feel like Bright was kind of the same way, where it would be a really good start where he went 5 scoreless with like double-digit strikeouts. He had, I don't know how many double-digit strikeout games he had last year, 3 or 4 at least. But then he'd have those starts where he couldn't get out of the second inning, or he couldn't get out of the third inning. He walked 5 batters. He gives up 6, 7, 8 runs. So far, he's 2 for 2. And it was like some nights he's pitching like a top 100 prospect. Other nights he's not making it out of the second inning. So far, he's got 2 starts where even when he gets roughed up, like he did against Hartford a little bit, and it was really 2 home runs. And I said this in the daily. One of them was just a great pitch and an even better swing. The hitter got the best of him. Hat tip to the hitter there. The other one was like, I think it was a slider that he just left right in the middle of the zone. So that one was his fault. But the no walks and 8 strikeouts was the biggest thing for me with Bright, because that was the limiting factor with him. And if he's going to continue that walk rate, my prediction is going to come true. I'm going to double down on it.
Yeah, the stuff is so good. If he's going to be able to limit the walks like that, then yeah, sky's the limit for him. Honestly, he could be he could be the next Kyle Bradish. I don't know if anyone said that, but I disappeared for a while. But I feel like he's got that kind of upside. And yeah, if he can just continue to earn the command.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Bob, because I think that Bradish as a prospect has some similarities to Bright now. Both guys had good fastballs. They had good curveballs. But the big question mark was always, are they going to actually develop a starter's pitch mix? And are they going to be able to command their pitches consistently? Because that was a knock on Bradish probably up until last year, was the command just isn't always there. And then last year he finishes 4th in Cy Young voting. Bright right now, I hope, is on a similar trajectory, because I think this stuff could really play up against major league hitters.
And Bright touched 97 on Sunday against Hartford, according to their radar gun. I don't know if I've seen him hit 97 up to this point in his career. That's pretty fun too. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll go now to my last pitcher, and Nick actually just mentioned him. It is Cade Povich. I think we've known really since he came over to this organization as part of the Jorge Lopez trade back at the 2022 deadline, that Povich has very, very high potential. A lefty who can throw in the mid-90s, has enough pitches to be a starter, doesn't come along very often. So you want to see what he can do. Last year, he led the Orioles minor leagues in strikeouts, but it was kind of an uneven year. And when you go through his game log last season, you can find 2 or 3 good starts at any point, given time of the year, 2 or 3 good starts sandwiched in between 2 or 3 really bad ones. And in the bad ones, he would have sort of this, lack of a better way to describe it, snowball effect, where the walks would pile up and then he'd give up a home run or an extra base hit at an inopportune time. And there would usually be one really bad inning in that start. And so far this year, Povich is showing strides in both those areas. You go through his game log right now, he's made 3 starts. In those 3 starts, he's issued a combined 5 walks while striking out 24. And this is the really key thing for me. Just 1 home run allowed. And that was back in his first start against, or actually his most recent start against Scranton Wilkes-Barre. That was the first time he's given up a home run all year. And it was still an excellent outing. That was the only hit that he surrendered. He struck out 10 batters, walked just 2. I think that if he's able to continue to make strides at his command and just prevent the big inning, he's got a real shot to get starts in the major leagues before this season ends.
The breakout is here. The Cade Povich breakout is here. The consistency was the last thing that we needed to see. And obviously, it's only been 3 games, but he did not put 3 games together like this for the entirety of 2023, whether it was AA or AAA. In his first start, he wasn't getting many swings and misses, but he was just, his command was on point. He was dropping curveballs in for strikes. His CSW was high, mostly from looking strikes, and that worked for him. And then in his second and third starts, the swing and miss was off the charts. I mean, I think he's got the highest swinging strike rate of anyone in minors, or at least AAA. I think Nick tweeted that out from our account, and it shows. He looks phenomenal. He's able to mix his pitches, and man, that curveball with the 94-mile-an-hour fastball, it's whew, I would not be surprised if he was starting in place of Cole Irvin. Wait, John Means is coming back. I don't know if John Means has a setback for whatever reason. Hopefully not. I could see Povich taking Irvin's spot by May.
Yeah, we always talk about the hitters and how comfortable like I felt, even though you had that rough patch. We talked about the rough patch last week, and I was like, all right, well, even if some guys don't break out, you've got Kerstad and Mayo and Norby, like you've got the reinforcements which is waiting down there in AAA. I feel like if there's a setback with Means, or is it, I don't know when we're releasing this portion of the episode, but Tuesday night, is that when Bradish is pitching for Bowie? Is it Wednesday? It's Tuesday. Tuesday night, I'm going to be watching that start, and I'm probably not going to watch the Kyle Bradish outing live because I'll be holding my breath with each pitch because I'm scared to death of any Kyle Bradish news that comes out. But if, God forbid, there is a setback with Bradish, it is nice to see Povich excelling the way he is, and that there is an arm, a starter, waiting in the wings. And I think all 3 of us would probably have assumed it was going to be Chase McDermott after what he did last year and then what he did in spring training. Unfortunately, he's made 3 starts and walked 5 guys in each start. But Povich has a 42% strikeout rate and 8% walk rate, which he had a 15% walk rate in AAA last year. And the whiffs are the biggest thing for me. He had 3 whiffs against Charlotte, his first outing, came back out 5 days later, faced Charlotte again, put up 16 whiffs, came out against Scranton Wilkes-Barre and put up 16 whiffs once again. And I think Baseball Savant had him categorized as 5 different pitches thrown in that game, which I think he throws much more than that. We had him on the show. Go search the archives, listen to our Kate Povich interview. He was great. I think he's had to get rid of some pitches because there were too many. But he got whiffs on all 5 of the pitches that Baseball Savant had categorized in that last start. So it's not just one pitch he's doing it on. He's doing it with all of them. So I love to see the consistency like you guys mentioned because it was not there at all last year. And so far he's 3 for 3.
Let's hope that continues. And we'll go now to our final segment of the show. We like to do this each week where we shout out a player who is outside of the top 30 portion of our top 50 prospects list for something that they've done, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or maybe just something interesting in their stat line that we want to point out. And I'll go ahead and start this segment with Bob.
Yeah, I'll get the less interesting one out of the way first, but I just don't want this guy to be completely forgotten. It's Isaac De Leon, first base / third base international signing that was by the Marlins, who we traded for. Was a shortstop when we got him, but he's grown out of that. 6'3", 210. He's listed at now, but he's only 22 years old. Second time through high A Aberdeen, 20 plate appearances to start the season, 6 games. But it's nice to see him batting .278 with a .739 OPS, which is a 124 WRC plus. I just think he's still got a little bit of potential. I liked him in 2022 into 2023. His strikeout rate continues to get better. He's maintaining an above average walk rate at the same time. I don't think he's ever going to be this huge power hitter, but could potentially work out as a role player at some point in his career. But the pitcher, I'm going back to Delmarva, and he had an amazing start in his second professional outing. It's Michael Ferret, and he is just turned 20 years old, actually. I thought he was a little bit older than that, but in his first time out, he went 3 innings, gave up 6 runs, 5 earned, struck out 4 batters. not ideal, obviously, but then in his second time out, got the win by pitching 5 scoreless, hitless innings, only walked 1 batter, struck out 7, and hit a batter. Just think it's another talented arm that we have to keep an eye out on. 34.4% strikeout rate, walk rate just under 10%, and can't wait to see what he does in his next time out. And we didn't even mention Jacob Cravey, Levi Wells, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, can we also just highlight real quick Michael Ferret? I found this tweet. I posted copy and pasted the tweet in Discord last night. Guy was sitting 91 and 93 last year. He's now sitting 95, topping out 97, and he throws the death ball. So he's instantly my favorite pitcher in this organization. I'm gonna go my pitcher first, and I'm gonna go a relief style. We got to talk about more relief pitchers here, especially considering we may be seeing some of these guys in the big league soon. But I'm going to go Dylan Hyde, just because Dylan Hyde went 3 2/3 innings against Hartford this past week across 2 outings. He had 0 hits, 0 runs, 0 walks, 3 strikeouts. I can't remember who started his first outing. It might have been the Branovich game that got away from him, but Hyde came in. There's a runner on first base, immediately gets a double play, and then he strikes out, gets the final out on a 97-mile-per-hour fastball. He's jacked coming off the mound, like trying to inject some life into this Bowie team. I love the energy. I had never seen that from Dylan Hyde on the mound. Comes out Saturday and shoves 2 2/3 innings. He's not just a 1-inning guy. He's regularly pumping 97 miles per hour, at least on these broadcast guns. Last year, he had a 2.58 ERA, a 185 average against, and 68 strikeouts in 45 innings between Aberdeen and Bowie. I'm keeping my eye on Dylan Hyde this year. I know like the minor leagues don't have that defined like closer setup roles, but I would love to see Hyde kind of step up and be that high leverage arm in Bowie. Hopefully not for long though. Hopefully we see him in AAA pretty soon. And for my hitter, I'm going to go Jalen Vasquez. We've highlighted him before as a really intriguing 20th round draft pick. And this past week, he went 4 for 10 with a double, a triple, walked 6 times and struck out just 1 time. Also had 3 stolen bases. I've also been really enjoying watching him play shortstop for Aberdeen. He didn't even have the most walks or strikeouts on his team this week. And it wasn't Enrique Bradfield Jr. that bested him. It was actually Tavian Josenberger, who had 7 walks and 4 stolen bases. But just wanted to throw another name in there. But 2 very fun pieces in this Aberdeen lineup. And Vasquez right now, coming into this week's games, has a 184 OPS, which ranks 5th among all Orioles minor league hitters. And the top 2 hitters in WRC Plus in the Orioles organization, I don't know if you guys have looked. Do you guys know who's number 1 right now? It is Creed Willems at number 1, the highest WRC Plus. And number 2 on that list is another catcher, Anutis Mordon. So Jalen Vasquez up there with the top prospects of Creed Willems and Anutis Mordon in terms of WRC Plus. Just fun to see. I really love watching this kid play ball.
Yeah. If I could just shout out a couple other Bowie relievers, Keegan Gillis continuing his dominant relief role. And guys, the Cage Stroud thing might be happening now. He's always had great stuff. I think John Mioli was like, don't be surprised if he's protected from the Rule 5 draft a year or 2 ago. I saw him at spring training walk the stadium. He just can touch triple digits, but was walking a million people well. So far this year, 0 ERA over 4.2 innings, only allowed 2 hits, 0 walks, and 7 strikeouts. So just something to keep an eye on.
Good call there. And I'm going to stick with Bowie's bullpen for my pitcher. Trey Mago is off to a very good start down in Bowie this year. Mago, just to go back a little bit here, was originally drafted by the Pirates in the 24th round in 2019 and moved through their system pretty quickly. He reached AAA in 2021 and was off to a good start there, but unfortunately had an elbow injury, had to undergo Tommy John surgery, and then the Orioles were able to pick him up in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft before last season. He got in some brief game action before the year ended, and he's back at Bowie this year. And so far, it looks like the Orioles are showing a little bit of caution. They're keeping him right now to 1 or 2 inning relief outings, but it's going really well for him. And in particular, last week was a good week for him. He had 2 outings at Hartford, going combined 3 innings in that stretch, 3 strikeouts to 1 walk. He picked up a save in Saturday's doubleheader. I expect Mago is going to get to, some good innings in AAA this year, or a good number of innings in AAA this year. But the Orioles, I think, wisely easing him back in a little bit here. And this was someone that back in the offseason we were discussing, should he be protected from the Rule 5 draft? That ultimately didn't happen, but he's making a strong case now to be on the radar for innings at AAA later this year and possibly even in the big leagues. And then for hitters, Silas Ordway had an interesting week. Tuesday night's game against Hartford, he takes a pitch off the nose, has to come out of the game. Actually, he's not in the lineup for a few days, but he made the most of his return, appearing in one game of Saturday's doubleheader and going 2 for 4 with a double. He followed that up with a 1 for 5 performance on Sunday. Small sample size, but he is off to a good start this year. And I think a reason to be encouraged is that after really struggling at the plate with Aberdeen last year, he was promoted to Bowie and performed really well down the stretch. And we were curious to see, okay, he looked good at Double-A last year, but it's still just 28 games, 117 plate appearances. Is that actually going to hold up over a full season? And so far, it's looking like it might. So Ordway, first off, great job bouncing back from a pretty scary moment, but he's really producing at the plate.
How many catchers can we throw into this final segment and not mention Samuel Basayo? That's the challenge.
That does it for this week's episode. We're going to be back later in the week to take listener questions covering things both in the majors and the minors. You're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up for as little as $3 a month, and at the $5 and $10 levels to have access to bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, covering all things Orioles minor leagues. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles Are on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to take listener questions, and we've got an interesting array, looking at some things minor leagues, but then also a lot of major league talk. And as is the case with our listeners, it might only be April, but we're going to talk trade deadline already. A quick note, though, before we dive into tonight's episode, I want to remind our listeners that we are doing a live show here in the next month. We will be heading to Checker Spot Brewing in Baltimore on May 11th. We're going to have a 2 p.m. show that will precede the Orioles game against the Diamondbacks that afternoon. So we certainly encourage you to come by. We'll have more details about the episode between now and the 11th, including an announcement on guests. We're also planning to do a listener Q&A during that show. And if you have tickets to the Orioles game that day, don't worry. Checker Spot is close to Camden Yards. You can come over, see our show. We'll wrap up in time for you to get to the ballpark. And who knows, maybe you could come back afterwards and see us again. And with that, we'll go into our first question of tonight's episode. And it's a kind of an ongoing topic of discussion because there's a lot of talented players in this area with so few spots to throw around. But Yoni wants to know about the Orioles outfield situation and how that's going to play out over the next few years. His question is, would love to hear you guys weigh in on how the outfield plays itself out over the next few years, assuming they keep 5 on the roster. And I'm going to start with Nick on this one.
Oh, can't you just enjoy the moment, Yoni? This team is winning, playing well. Why we got to have this infield conversation with the outfield already? It is fun to think about, though. I guess Mullins has a couple more years on that contract. Kind of hoping he stays healthy and produces. That catch he made on Monday night, good Lord. And then he homered in that game as well. Unbelievable. He keeps playing like that. No issues there. Santander, obviously, his contract runs out this year. We'll see if he walks or not. I would like to see at least one of those guys extended. Nothing major, but get him on a 2-3 year deal. Honestly, I would prefer it to be Santander. I've I've always been a massive Santander fan, but I became a stan this offseason. I think I decided, and just as a fan, forget about how are we going to fit these guys in defensively and all this stuff. Forget about all that for a second. Just as a fan, I am a diehard Santander fan and an Orioles fan, and I want to see Santander in an Orioles uniform for the next couple of years. I'm going to die on every Santander hill that I can. But Hayes can obviously, he's Colton Cowser's here. I'll just say that. We'll leave that one alone. I will say though, I hope everyone listening finds someone in their life that loves them just as much as Orioles beat reporters and Masson talking heads love hyping up Austin Hayes and highlighting the fact that he was an all-star last year. The world would be a better place. But Hayes, I don't see long-term in this future. Hopefully you extend Santander. Mullins at least plays out his contract. Let's go that route. You do have a nice order of succession here in this organization. Judd Fabian, Enrique Bradfield Jr. hopefully lining up as Mullins' contract ends. But you do have a lot of questions with those two guys and their bats and their development. Dylan Beavers he was drafted to be a long-term project. I still think we could not see him in the major leagues for, another year plus 2 years, probably. I could see that situation playing out. Cowser's arrived. Kjerstad, is he going to be like the Ryan O'Hearn replacement? Or if Santander walks, could Kjerstad play right field? I do think the conversation about Kjerstad's defense is very Santander-like, where his lack of defensive ability is exaggerated a little bit. But I'm looking at the crop of free agents this year, and we could go after this Juan Soto guy. Like, new ownership, what do you want to do? You want to make a statement, you could sign Juan Soto, of course, but then it's Cody Bellinger, no. Alex Verdugo, pass. Michael Conforto, hard no. Joey Gallo, Tyler O'Neill, Jock Peterson, Lourdes Gurriel, Teoscar Hernandez, Aaron Hicks, Mark Canna. I can keep going. A lot of trash, a lot of old dust. And then it's Santander. Give me Santander. Let Mullins at least play out his extension. Try to mix Kjerstad in there some way. Hope Fabian and Bradfield pan out within the next 2 years. We'll see what the next year's free agent class looks like. But a lot of what ifs. But the Orioles have set themselves up pretty nicely with their timelines. I will say that, to give them some outs over the next couple of years.
Yeah, just like the infield. Going to have plenty of options, that's for sure. Could sign Santander to an extension of short to moderate length. You could extend Mullins at some point. You could extend the qualifying offer to Santander and hope to keep him and Mullins at least through 2025. Cowser obviously has already established that he'll probably be the main left fielder for the foreseeable future, starting maybe now. Kjerstad will be up at some point. I do think he's more of an O'Hearn replacement or Santander replacement eventually. Stowers, I think, could still come up and be like the fourth, fifth outfielder that could give you pop off of the bench. Beavers, Fabian, they're not that far away. Bradfield, obviously, a little bit further than that. Maybe not. Maybe he's up at some point next year. Like you said, it's kind of reminding me of that infield where we eventually traded Joey Ortiz. Which one of these outfielders are they going to trade and finally come up with their establishment? If I have to say, all right, opening day 2026, what are my 5 outfielders? I will say Cowser in left, Bradfield in center, Kjerstad in right, and I will say Fabian 4th outfielder, Stowers 5th outfielder.
I could see that. I get the feeling that
somehow I completely left out Dylan Beavers, but hey, maybe that's the guy they trade for another pitcher or something.
I get the sense that if the Orioles are going to do an extension in, the next, let's say 8 to 12 months, that it could end up being Santander or Mullins, because you could probably get either player on a reasonable contract. I've said before, and I'll say again, that for as much as I love Cedric Mullins, I do think there is a little bit of a risk in extending him and him losing a step or two in center field as you get into that contract. And now you're looking at kind of a fringe left fielder offensively. And that would worry me a little bit. But yeah, that's a discussion for another day. As for how the rest of the outfield situation plays out, I think that Cowser is going to establish himself as an everyday player. I think the Orioles are going to try to make Kjerstad sort of a first base DH right field hybrid. You certainly can't rule out Stowers. Can't rule out Dylan Beavers at all. I think that his ceiling is really high. Judd Fabian, I think, gets to the big leagues on the basis of his center field defense. The question is going to be the strikeouts. If he strikes out too much, then you're probably looking at a Jake Marinzik type player, someone who can hit lefties, good in that role. You love his defense, but strikes out too much to be an everyday player, especially on a team that's looking to compete. And I'll go down a little bit here, and I'm just going to throw his name out there because he has yet to give me a reason to doubt him early in his professional career, but don't sleep on Matthew Etzel in this conversation. I think he's a little ways off. This isn't a near-term solution. We're talking about a guy that's only in high A, drafted out of a small school, but he's a right fielder who really has the skill set of a center fielder. Good bat-to-ball skills. The power is showing up so far this season. Don't sleep on him at all as a possible at least fourth or fifth outfielder.
I'm also still on the Matt Horvath breakout train, and he's a guy that can play third base and corner outfield. So, yeah, I'm getting dizzy just thinking about this. So maybe we should move on to the next question, which just so happens to be from Joe Adams, which problem solved. We tried to pronounce his name last week, and it's just was Joe Adams spelled backwards. So very cool to find out. He asks, when do we see the first set of promotions? And I'm assuming he means like from AA to AAA, minor league promotions. And who are the top players on that list to be moved?
I would not mind seeing. My first thought seeing this question was I wouldn't mind seeing like a Kyle Bronovich to AAA, Cameron Weston to AA, Luis De Leon to high A kind of series of moves. It's hard to just say like Luis De Leon to Bowie or Aberdeen or Cameron Weston to Bowie because like, where are you going to pitch? But I like that kind of waterfall of moves to happen. As far as there's some relief arms that I know we just talked about on the minor league segment of the show, and I do agree that I would love to see like a Keegan Gillies, Cade Stroud, Dylan Hyde moved up to AAA at some point in the very near future because I think that Norfolk team could use some pitching help, and they've all earned a right to be pitching in AAA. And the bat, Zach just stole the thunder by mentioning it. Matthew Etzel, I'm going to throw out as I think he could be one of the first of the bigger bats to get moved up. And like if Kjerstad gets moved up to the big leagues, like Billy Cook's going to Norfolk, I feel like that's pretty obvious replacement there. But I don't know about you guys, but I don't really see anyone right now. I don't really see anyone that super stands out as like they should be at another level right now, other than Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, and Kjerstad, obviously. But that's different. But Etzel is like he was fantastic in Delmarva last year. He's off to a great start so far in Aberdeen. I know one of his goals this year was to hit the ball harder, increase those exit velos. And if he is hitting the ball harder this year, don't have accurate exit velo numbers on it right now, but if he is hitting the ball harder, he's not sacrificing anything for it. And so I could see him being, why not? Why couldn't he be one of the first big bats moved up to Bowie? Fear the beard. It's there.
It's working for Colton Cowser. It's working for Matthew Etzel. Yeah. Everyone's got to grow out a beard. Yeah, from hitter side, I don't think there's going to be that much movement, at least in the beginning of the year that we've seen in the past. Obviously, eventually, I think all these guys, the draft picks that are in high A, will find their way up to Bowie. I wonder if Creed Willems is one of the first. Again, I don't think it's anytime particularly soon, but Anutis Mordan could probably be due to move up to Aberdeen by June, sometime in June. And then if Creed Willems is going to do the thing where he mastered high A over the offseason somehow, he's going to go up to AA, struggle mightily, and then come back in 2025 having mastered AA right from the get-go. And I think that's just going to be his progression of things. So hitting, that's a lot tougher to see. But on the pitching side, honestly, almost, I feel like 40% of the pitchers on the minor league rosters could deserve to be called up at any point. So I could see if they say, Caleb Ort, this isn't working out. You're gone. Nolan Hoffman, sorry, it's not working out. Tucker Davidson, goodbye. Then you move up Keegan Gillis. You could move up Cade Stroud. You could move up Peak Bonovich, like you're talking about these guys, McGow, Seth Johnson. And then that just escalates all the way down. Yaki Rivera could go up to the Bowie bullpen. I could easily see that happening early in the year, and so on and so forth. So I think look for a batch of pitching promotions if they decide to move on from a couple of the minor league signings in the AAA bullpen.
I would think that in early May we see some movement. You'll be a month into the year, and things will, it typically takes a month for these things to start sorting themselves out, but they always do. And if I had a guess, I would say that Trey McGough is the first of the bullpen arms out of Bowie to go to Norfolk because he has that AAA time. I think that, like I talked about on our episode earlier this week, he just needs that kind of ease back in because he missed so much time after the Tommy John surgery. And then if you want to look below that, Yaki Rivera, I think, is making a really strong case for a promotion, but I think Cameron Weston is the first to go from Aberdeen to Bowie. And then that sets up De Leon from Delmarva to Aberdeen because I think De Leon's going to have a big year, and there's really nothing left for him to prove at Delmarva.
Good call. And if and when Heston Kjerstad gets caught up to the majors, obviously I think Billy Cook will find his way back up to AAA. But I think Judd Fabian is going to be in AAA before Dylan Beavers. I'll at least say that.
Yeah, it's really funny to watch Fabian this year. Off to a much better start so far in terms of it's like, yes, he had a single. All right, this is Judd Fabian's single time. Let's go. It's not a strikeout or a home run or a walk. But yeah, I like all of that. I do think it's going to be a lot of pitcher-heavy promotions that we're anticipating this year. But we'll go to Callie, who has a question that says, do we make a trade for more bullpen help? And who is on the block? Zach?
Yes, the Orioles are going to trade for more bullpen help because, number one, that's just kind of a standard thing for teams to do at the deadline because they're looking ahead to figure out, okay, who can actually get us deep into the postseason or who could be the difference maker in us getting to the postseason. So that's just part of it. But then I also think that you are seeing some areas where this bullpen, not as dominant as it was last year. So I think that as the season goes on, it's become apparent, okay, maybe you're fine with Cano, Colomb, and Kimbrel at the back end, but the middle innings could use some help. Let's figure out a way to do that. And my expectation, I don't have any particular players in mind right now as for who could be on the block, but I would say to look for a guy with similar traits to Sentaro Fujinami, but actually having a good season. And he's not going to be a guy you try to fix over the final couple months of the year. And right now, if you want to look around the league, the Rockies and Marlins are off to terrible starts. The White Sox are off to a horrible start. I don't know if any of those teams are going to have bullpen arms you're necessarily going to want, but I wouldn't rule that out. And then, between now and July, we're going to get a clearer sense of what the seller's market is going to look like. And some options will emerge then. But just know there's going to be plenty of relievers available and plenty of teams looking for bullpen help.
Yeah, I mean, we're a contender. In 3 months, we will make a trade for a relief pitcher. Wouldn't be surprised if the A's were a target. I'm just going to say it. The Discord is absolutely salivating over the idea of Mason Miller in an Orioles uniform, and I would too, but he's also a former top 100 prospect as a starting pitcher who's only closing games right now because he doesn't have the innings to start for them. So I mean, it is the A's, so you never know, but I don't see them trading him until at least he hits arbitration. Obviously a fantastic arm, but there are other guys to target from the A's or the Rockies, even though they're so weird. They don't trade, they don't rebuild. I don't know what they're doing. The White Sox, I don't know, unless it's Michael Kopech, if they even have anyone worth going after. The Marlins have obviously pitching talent. They just sent Max Meyer down for some reason after he got off to an amazing start to the year. Very weird decision. Edward Cabrera had a good start today in his season debut. Sixto Sanchez, is he back? I don't know. I think there's plenty of options. Who knows who it's going to be, because it's going to be at least 3 months from now. In the meantime, I think we have some options in AAA or soon to be AAA that could help the team if needed. Wanderson Charles off to a great start, 3 ERA over 6 innings with 8 strikeouts, only 3 walks. Matt Crook off to a good start. Nick Vespi, as always, is off to a great start. He's just a really, really solid major league lefty that's spent a lot of time in AAA the past few years. I'm still big on Albert Suarez. I don't know about you guys. I know he's 34 and he's got a 5.87 ERA in AAA over 15 and a third innings, but 17 strikeouts, 1 walk. He's got that mid to upper 90s fastball with hop on it. I like him a lot still. Even a guy like Luis Gonzalez has 8 strikeouts to 1 walk over 6 and a third. And then we have the guys we've already talked about, Gillies, Hyde, Stroud, these other guys coming up, Branovich, even Povich or McDermott. Like these guys, if you really just need someone in the bullpen, you can go to the upside for now this year. So I think we're fine on the bullpen. Cionel Perez is on the injured list. He'll be back at some point. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing necessarily, but if he's on his game, he's a great lefty pitcher as well. So yeah, not too worried about the bullpen. Obviously you don't have Felix, but he's one of a kind.
Yeah, I think you summarized it pretty well there with the relievers, and maybe you don't need to make a big home run type trade with the bullpen. You can find somebody who's got the crazy good pitch data that you love. And like Zach said, maybe you don't need to fix him. He's already having a decent year, but he makes it as a nice complementary piece to the bullpen. And hopefully guys continue to step up, fill their role. And we see some more guys from the minor leagues step up. I was actually going to throw out a tweet earlier today. I didn't get around to it, but highlighting Luis Gonzalez, because in his last outing with Norfolk, I think he pitched 2 innings and had like 9 whiffs, no walks, 4 strikeouts. He's throwing, I can't remember what he's throwing, like 93, 94, but from the left side, he was a former top 30 prospect in this organization and then was out of affiliated ball for the last couple of years. Then he went to San Francisco for a year after the Orioles released him. The guy was in Frederick for like 4 seasons, but went to the Giants. And then I think he's pitched in Italy, Mexico, the Dominican. He's pitched all over the globe in like the 3 years since he was in pro ball. Orioles re-signed him this offseason, put him in AAA. So I think he could be an option. He's getting swings and misses down there, pitching well. That could be a fun arm at some point, a stopgap option. But yeah, it will be interesting to see these trades, though. You mentioned Miami, Tanner Scott, anybody? Probably not. But I think the Marlins do have a lot of arms, especially in their rotation of even guys who like probably should be in the bullpen. Like, you know, could AJ Puck go back to the bullpen and find the form that he's had the last 2 years, especially last year? A guy like that, I don't imagine he would cost a ton. But somebody like that, even maybe another team is trying them out in the starting rotation and they're not performing, but they've got proven success in the minor league or in the bullpen. Could we swing a trade for that type of player and bring him in? I don't know AJ Puck specifically, but yeah, I don't see them spending huge to acquire a bullpen piece because just like last year, Michael I said, you know, we've got the internal pieces here, and that ended up being DL Hall. I think they do have the internal pieces here. It's just going to take a little bit more time for those guys to develop and reach the big leagues, but.
We'll go now to
oh, sorry, it's you.
Go on now to this question from Ben. What are the chances that Jordan Westburg is an all-star this year? I'll start with Bob.
Ben, we get it. You're a huge Jordan Westburg fan. Get the statue built up, retire his number. I don't know. I think he's going to be, they're not going to give too many guys from the same team an all-star bid. I think Gunner's already pretty much locked up. Adley's going to be pretty much locked up. The big names are that Kimbrel's pitching like an all-star, Burns, obviously, Grayson, and Westbrook's, you know, he was off to a slow start and now he's been on fire. Obviously, if he continues to hit the way he has in the past week, and he's always been a streaky hitter, if he can just get on a torrent in the first half of the year, then maybe there's a chance. But I'd say it's still under 50%. It's an outside shot looking in, but I'm still happy with how he's performing. That's for sure.
Yeah, I pulled up Fangraphs leaderboards here real quick, and this is probably going to come out much later in the week, and we're recording this Monday night. So going into Monday night's games, Jordan Westburg right now among second basemen, AL second baseman, he is fourth in F4 behind Jose Altuve, Marcus Semien, Andres Jimenez. I think Altuve and Semien are obviously going to be hard to overcome in like all-star voting for a second base job. Edward Julian is down there at number 6. He could be the Twins' lone like pity all-star representative because I don't know who else Minnesota has on this team, even though we are playing them right now. But if you move over to third base, like Devers isn't playing very well so far this year. And actually, as I pull it up again, Jordan Westburg is tied with Isaac Paredes for the lead among AL third basemen in F4. And no one else is really. Yohan Moncada, I think he died. Again, he's on the IL because it's another year. I don't see anyone else on the third base list here in the AL that could challenge him other than Isaac Paredes. So I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, we got it, Ben. Jordan Westburg is the guy. He's hitting the ball incredibly hard. I will say that. He's been more consistent this year so far. He's got a 149 WRC plus, which I was not expecting. He is exceeding my expectations so far as a big leaguer. And they were fairly decently high expectations I had of him coming into the year. So
I would put it right now about a 25 to 30% chance. You ran off some of the numbers there. He's, among the better hitters at 2 positions in the American League. One of the things working against him, though, is that by the time we're really figuring out, by the time we have a clearer picture of who should be an all-star, Westburg will have primarily been a third baseman because you have Jackson Holliday in the major leagues now. And I think it's going to be a higher barrier at third base just because of the expectations for how hitters perform offensively at second base versus third base. There's going to be an expectation of a little bit more power at third base than there is at second, where an all-star second baseman might hit 20 to 25 home runs. That number is going to be higher at third base. So I think that does work against him. We're also only a couple weeks into the season, and let's not forget this time last week, he was not looking too good at the plate, or at least the numbers had not come along yet. So things can fluctuate. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't think the chances are very high, at least yet.
It's me. Ben also would like to know how many of our current 8 relievers are on the club by season's end. Let's run it right back to Zach.
So I'm guessing that Ben is still working on Dylan Tate's Hall of Fame plaque. I think that the last update we had at the end of 2022. So good news, Ben. I do think that Dylan Tate is going to be on the roster at the end of this year. And then I think that you look at how the bullpen shakes out right now. I'm assuming CNL Perez is not in this equation, so because he's on the IL right now. So I think Kimbrel, Webb, Cano, and Colomb are all still around as long as they can stay healthy. The same with Keegan Aiken.
Don't do that. Jacob Webb sucks. Doesn't matter how good he pitches. He is terrible and should be DFH. That's for you.
But, well, yeah, I do think that they're going to pursue some help from the trade market, as we just talked about. There's probably be 1 or 2 relievers brought up from the minor leagues at the end of the year. So let's just say for right now that 5 of the 8 current relievers are on the roster at the end of the year.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Sorry, Nick, I'm jumping the line. I already did it. Might as well just continue. I think Kimbrel, Cano, Colomb, and Tate are pretty safe. I think Jacob Webb has a good chance to be there at the end. Sorry, Ben. Mike Baumann, I'm not so sure, is long for the bullpen. He's got the stuff. I mean, he could put it all together and be a productive reliever for the Orioles, but just something tells me he's going to continue to be inconsistent and at some point might get DFA'd in favor of somebody else. But yeah, I agree with Zach.
Yeah, same. Yohan Ramirez, be cool if you're like the next Dylan Tate, the guy who you come in to realize the Orioles are like, they really like this guy back in the day when they were familiar with him. And how did Eve put it when she was on the show that with CNL Perez, he didn't have the runway in Houston and they gave him the runway here in Baltimore and he had a dominant year that year and has been pretty successful ever since. Is Johan Ramirez that next guy? I don't know. I don't see him sticking around. I don't see Michael Bowen finishing the year either. I see ideally Cole Irvin and Tyler Wells are in the bullpen, I think. So that adds two of those pieces. But yeah, I would say Ramirez and Bauman are not here, and Perez is, though. Sorry, Ben. It's 11 o'clock at night. Easy target right now. Sorry to
and Jonathan Heasley's going to be there too, by the way.
Sorry, you're catching all the strays at 11 p.m. on a Monday night. All right, we'll go. Final question here. We'll wrap this marathon up. Bird is the word. Ask, does Connor Norby ever get a shot with the Birds, Bob?
Long term, I think he's destined to be the centerpiece of the next big trade that the Orioles make. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he does make his major league debut with the Orioles at some point, whether it's because of injury. I mean, it would almost have to be. But let's just say that at some point Ramon Arias is traded or DFA'd, and then there's because we're going to call this minor. I'm not wishing major on anyone. There's a minor injury to a Jordan Westberg or to someone that Norby could come in and fill their shoes, make his major league debut, hopefully perform well, raise his stock. Good for him, good for the Orioles, and everybody's happy in the end.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Bob. I feel like long-term it is going to be a trade package, but let's not forget that Joey Ortiz had a cup of coffee in the major leagues, the Orioles, actually a couple of stints in the majors before he was ultimately packaged in a trade. And I could see the same thing happening for Norby. And because he's getting some time in right field this year, I think the Orioles are thinking ahead to how they can fit him on the roster at some point when a need arises. But there's only so many at-bats to go around. And I still believe that, if we're here in July and the Orioles need to get another starter, Connor Norby's going to be a guy they can really dangle out there because let's face it, Connor Norby's probably an upgrade over a fair number. I won't say like half the league or even a third of the league, but a fair number of second basemen right now are going to be at a level that's lower than Connor Norby. So Norby would actually make some teams better if he was traded at the deadline and immediately plugged in at second base.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this last week's mailbag, and I said there's Blocked and then there's Connor Norby, who's just like cemented into where he is in Norfolk. I think it will take significant injury or injuries, I think, for him to get up to the big leagues. Maybe if there's a situation where he, like a Joey Ortiz situation last year, how he made his debut, you need this type of hitter in this series. Guys are struggling and you go ahead and bring him up, but he's not on the 40-man roster right now. So that adds a whole nother wrinkle to this as well. He's not on the 40-man roster. He is Rule 5 eligible at the end of the year. So I guess I think the difficult thing is, like, do you aggressively dangle him out there and try to get a trade done this year by this year's trade deadline? But at the same time, how eager are the Orioles to trade him? Because it's like this weird balancing act, because you don't need to trade him right now. He's super high quality depth to have in the minor leagues that you'd love to have. Because what if there is an injury to Holliday or Gunnar and you can bring up Norby to help ease that replacement a little bit? But at the same time, it's like the longer you hold on to him, what does that do to his trade value? Are you going to be able to get the maximum amount of return for Norby if you wait until the offseason? Or the Orioles fine with that and they say, we want that insurance policy down there in AAA and we'll take the hit on that value. But that doesn't seem like a very Michael Elias thing to do. So I don't know. Again, as we always say when we talk about Norby, I feel bad for the kid. He's got a 136 WRC plus in AAA right now with 4 home runs. He's playing very good baseball. It's just I don't see any room right now as far as the roster stands.
Yeah, I agree with that. And hopefully he continues to have success at AAA and can be that guy that the Orioles can fill in a need if there is one. That does it for this week's mailbag. We will be back next week to talk all things Orioles, major leagues, and minor leagues. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels. We're over at Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and join our community where you can sign up for as little as $3 a month. And at the $5 and $10 levels, have access to exclusive bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe podcast network.